Why do certain moments trigger you so strongly? Why do the same patterns keep repeating? And how can you begin to break free? Welcome to What Triggers You with Stacy Pelletieri. Each week, one listener question unpacked with compassion, clarity, and practical tools for change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Triggers You. I'm Stacy Pelletieri, licensed clinical social worker, trauma therapist, and your host. On this podcast, we explore trauma, triggers, and the ways our past experiences continue to shape our present. Some episodes feature anonymous guests sharing their personal stories, while others bring in experts to discuss topics that intersect with trauma healing, relationships, mental health, and human behavior. My goal is simple: to help you better understand yourself and the people around you. So let's get started. On today's show, I do have one of our anonymous guests that is here to be vulnerable and brave and share with our guests so that we can sort of move anyone that's listening forward into their own space of healing, and hopefully our guest as well. So, welcome, Michelle, to the show.
It's good to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yes, me as well. So, Michelle, let's really just dig in and start with what brings you to what triggers you. So, the question then is, what are your triggers? What are you hoping to talk about and learn about today?
Sure. Well, some of the triggers I have stem from with having a disability. I sometimes it can be really difficult when I hear other people who will say things like that person will never be successful, or if you want to be successful in life, you better know how to do that. And that can be really hard on me because there are some things with having a learning disability that I'm simply not able to do. So hearing that can really bring me back to that place whenever I was a lot younger and people were telling me, well, you're never going to be able to go to college and you're never going to be able to get your bachelor's degree. Other times it can be triggering for me if I'm dealing because I was bullied as a child with having a disability. It can sometimes that not being heard and either wanting to be accepted or really just wanting to be my own person. And I sometimes I'm really good at deciphering if it's somebody that is outright mean, but other times there can just be those little trigger or those little pieces of just somebody that might just be trying to push my buttons a little bit, and then that can also trigger me and it takes me back to that place and I feel like I have to be heard.
Michelle, my brain is buzzing and I find myself feeling triggered hearing you talk about all of these things because this is stuff that's near and dear to my heart. Personal experience with my own child and all of the people I work with in practice. I work with a lot of kids and I work with a lot of school districts and I work with a lot of children with learning disabilities and neurodivergent folks. And I will tell you, you're not alone in this journey. And it is so important. And I am really so honored and excited to have you here because this is such an important conversation. But let's start with you. I have a bunch of questions I want to ask, but
Okay.
I'm going to start with the most obvious. And what I want to understand is when you yourself say you get triggered, what does that feel like for you? Can you help us understand like what the experience of being triggered is like for you? Is it a feeling in your body? Is it a thought in your mind? Is it an overwhelm of emotion? How do you experience the trigger?
Sometimes what the trigger does to me is I'll just start with just thinking back to that, and I'm really distracted. I think that's usually the first thing because my mind automatically goes back to what happened in the past, and then I'll have that triggering point where I just feel like, okay, I'm going back to all of this. Sometimes it can also just be like I get like real nervous or I have to be busy. I have to kind of distract myself with that, and I'm just constantly on guard.
Yeah. So I wonder then if what's happening for you right now in your present adult self, when these things come up for you, like for example, if you hear somebody say to another person or even to you, you're never going to be successful or you're not going to be able to do that or that's going to be too hard for you. Even though you're here in your present adult being, it sounds like what happens is your brain kind of travels backward in time a little bit and there's that memory. of what it was like to be a child and to be told you're never going to, you're never
Right.
going to, you're never going to. And so when that memory brings you back to that moment, it brings up a feeling for you. And it sounds like your defense mechanism against that feeling is to distract. Let me
Mhm.
distract myself so I don't have to sit with the discomfort of how it feels to think I'm never going to.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it's so hard. So, if we were to go back and if we were to sit with that distress, if we were to not distract and we were to go back to this little younger version of Michelle in a moment where you're being told you're never going to, do you remember as a child how it felt to hear that?
It made me really fearful, and I was not the person that was for some people, that makes them really self-determined to go out and do things. For me, it just made me really afraid because I wondered, what am I going to do? I can remember that I was with I had a teacher that told me that I could not go to college because I couldn't handle the math, and this was a learning support teacher, and she wanted to put me in one of the programs where they did, like, vocational work, a training school, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't for me, and looking back, that would have been a lot harder in so many areas, but I was so afraid because I knew the math was going to be the big thing that was going to m make it difficult, but I just wondered, how can I handle it? And that was really hard as being a young child and having math and thinking to myself, well, how am I going to go to college? Or how am I going, if I can't even get the basic math, how am I going to budget? How am I going to be able to function in life?
Well, that's the message you got, right? When you're a little kid and the adults around you are saying
Mhm,
to you, you're not going to be able to,
mhm.
right? Like there's this non-functioning, no college, no job, no budgeting. You're not going to be able to manage a household or be a grown up or survive in the world if you can't, right? This is the equation that was handed to you. Talk about math, right?
Yeah,
This is how it was adding up, right? You have to be
right.
able to do X in order to receive Y, right? And here you are being told as a little child by the adults in your life, you're not going to be able to. Instead of them telling you, there are other ways to be successful in life, even if you're not good at math, in the times when you will need math, there are other ways to solve equations. There are other ways to get by. There are accommodations, right? You
Yes.
can survive without it. I mean, how much is math really a part of our day-to-day lives? Especially when, we're all walking around with a calculator in our pockets at this point, and no one even
Right.
needs to know math, right?
Exactly. And I also find too that people would say, I can't tell time on the face of a clock. And I still, that is a trigger when I hear people say, well, you're not always going to have a digital display around. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's actually not true. I You have your phone, I have my Fitbit. I make sure in my house I have digital displays so I can tell what time it is. I don't think that it makes me less than a person or lazy, as some people would say, because I use supports that I have and I can make those decisions. And when I talk about maybe how much we will use something, I can remember I was working with a student that was really frustrated with reading and in a class, and it wasn't a reading class, but he goes, "When am I ever going to use this information?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, you may never use it when you're an adult, but right now we got to get through this assignment." And that student would come to me and felt confident because I wasn't going to pick on him. I wasn't going to try to, yeah, make him feel less than because he couldn't do it. But really, as an adult, we pick if we're not good at something or something doesn't work for us, then we have that option at that time to be able to pick it or
Yes.
something different. Yeah.
Yes, right? As adults, we get to choose our path.
Mhm.
As children, we don't. And so
Right.
I'm hearing you say student you work with. Can you tell us as an adult today, what is it that you do?
I work as a para educator in a school. And some of my students have disabilities and some of them don't. And all the kids know, do not ask me for help with math. And I can remember a time when I really felt incomplete, that how was I going to help these students? And that was that fear coming in. And I realized this is what helps me, though, to be empathetic. And it helps me to really be able to relate to a lot of my students. Not all of them. I can't say what every single person is going through, but I kind of get that general idea.
Yeah. So that's so beautiful, right? That you get to be that person in the school for the students that you needed.
Hmm.
I wonder if that's triggering for you, just to think about the role you're playing in the lives of these kids that really is a role you needed.
Exactly. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes it does bring me back because I knew that was sometimes it's like even hearing a recording of myself. I hate my disability. It doesn't make me feel I don't feel like I'm smart. And sometimes that can be difficult to bring that. But I find that I look at it as this is my opportunity though. I mean, I can't change my past. I can't change the things that I've done or the things that have been done to me, but I get to be that encouraging voice going through. And I can remember when I went back to university, a lot of people said, "Well, you have your associate's degree. Why don't you just get another job?" Whenever it was downsizing, and I really thought, well, I wanted to try to get that degree. I want to try to go and do that. I just told myself I have to try. And a lot of people would think, well, you're working as a teacher's aide. You're still doing the same thing you did before you went to university. But now I look at it, my students that I was going to be working with, if I didn't go back to university, I don't think I could be the happy, positive person that can be that encouraging with them. I think I would have been really negative because my things didn't work out in my life. But now because I had that experience, it bring back my confidence. It brought me back to not being negative. I went through a season for many years where I was not a happy, positive person.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Can you maybe walk us through it a little bit? Can you help us to understand how going to university helped you change how you see yourself?
Well, one of the things I have it right on a paper that said most likely not to go beyond community college. And I was able to go through community college with a lot of struggles and a lot of stigma. But when I went to university, I started to realize if I got into a program that didn't have a lot of math and science, wasn't heavy on math and science, I was doing well in my classes. I had A's on tests. I made dean's list for a semester, and I started to really see the things I could do opposed to the things that I had no control over. I have no control over that I have a disability and makes math really hard. I have no control that I can't drive, but the things and I have no control over the reactions and what people tell me. But what I do have all that control over is I can make those really wise choices. I can make the choice that, okay, maybe becoming a certified teacher is not a great idea, or becoming a mathematician isn't in the cards for me. But there are programs I can do. And it's just about finding that way to be able to do it and being able to go forward with that. And whenever I do, even today in my life, when I'm reading or I'm walking or I'm taking pictures, I don't feel like I have a disability or I don't feel like I'm missing out. Usually, I feel like I'm empowered and I'm happy. And those are the things I do have control over.
That's great. So, how do you think it is that you helped yourself shift, right? Because you're talking about growing up and
Mhm.
there being so much focus on what you couldn't do, right? Let's
Correct.
let's let's take the every human being has strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
right? So, it sounds like what they were doing at school, which is common, we hear this a lot, is they were focusing on what you couldn't do, right? Because their
Right.
role was to try to help you, right? Like if a student has dyscalculia, which is a learning disability with math, then that means we have to get them math tutors and have extra help in math and special math classes. And you end up spending more time doing math than anything else, right? So it's really
Right.
highlighted this one thing that you're not so great at, and you spend more time in that and less time in all the things you're good at. So, how did you get from that to being able to hone in on your strengths and feeling like you could try the things that you were good at and flourish in those ways? Where did the courage and the strength to do that come from?
A lot of it came when I was that discouraged child at that age. My mom and dad never gave up on me, and they were able to identify things I was good at. They didn't sugarcoat things. They didn't say, "Oh yeah, you're great at math or you're great at sports." But what they did find that I was really good at was I was good with reading and I was good with writing. In fact, I wrote a story in 2nd or 3rd grade about a dinosaur, and my dad said, "Wow, this is really good." And that changed my life because up until that point, I didn't think I was good at anything. And the teachers found out I could read really well. I mean, I might have struggled with reading comprehension, but I read with expression. So they encouraged me to read and out loud. And they also encouraged me in the classroom to get up and do presentations, especially as I went throughout school, because I could stand up in front of the room and be able to speak. And I think that encouragement helped, especially with the reading and the writing. Reading and writing really became my world, especially when I was being bullied. I would write stories and poems, and I would have books that I would love to read. And that really became important to me in my life.
That's great. It's so important to have that little support, right? That little support can go a long way. Just having that one person that believes in you, right? You can internalize that and it helps you to really start to believe in yourself, which is why the role you're playing for these kids can be life changing because for some of the students you work with, you might be the only person in their life that believes in them, that can make that difference for them, which is a beautiful thing.
Yep, exactly. They tell us at our training, sometimes you might be the only positive person that somebody might have been in the life of a child. And I just feel so, I feel like I'm coming full circle when I get to work with my students.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. So let's talk about how we can help you, right? Because it sounds like in a lot of ways you are healthy. You have good self awareness. You have really been able to catapult yourself into a position that makes sense for you. You've been able to find your strengths and realize that just because you're not good at math doesn't mean you
Mhm.
can't be successful in life.
Right.
Right? Even if somebody has a learning disability, so to speak, it doesn't mean that there's a disability in every aspect of life. There are areas where there is not a
Mhm.
disability. There are areas where you flourish and you're strong and you can do amazing things. So let's talk about where you do still currently have triggers, where that does still sort of come into your life in a negative way. And let's talk about maybe what we can do to help you to be able to leave some of that behind going forward, if that's okay.
That is perfectly fine. I think some of the things that I'm still triggered with might be if I'm dealing with others and they're not it's not like they're being outright mean, but they can be a little sneaky with that. And sometimes I think that can be really triggering for me because it brings up being bullied and not feeling like I'm heard. And I have to feel like I have to respond to everything. Like everybody who says something to me, I go through this where I have to like reason with somebody like that. And maybe that person really doesn't want to reason with me. They want to try to, just push those buttons. So I think that's one of the biggest thing. And justifying why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think sometimes that can be a big trigger for me. I feel like I have to have someone understand me. I have to have somebody know why I'm doing what I'm doing rather than being okay with who I am. And I think another trigger too is people will tell me, well, you don't look like you're disabled because people can't see my disability. And once again, it comes into that justification where I feel like I have to over explain and overshare.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a hard one. I hear that a lot, and we see that, that can happen with people with learning disabilities. It happens a lot in the world of our neurodivergent folk, right? Like things like
Mhm.
ADHD or autism don't appear, right? It's a look on your face. It's,
Right,
you're not purple or green or orange,
right.
right? It's you look like everybody else, right? And so it's
Mhm.
very easy to see a disability when somebody is in a wheelchair. Well, that person's legs don't work. I can see that they can't walk. It makes sense to me.
Mhm.
So I accept it, right? But when somebody has a disability where their brain doesn't calculate numbers, or there's certain neurotransmitters or wiring in their brain that doesn't connect well together, and so they can't read social cues, or their working memory is not intact, or they can't see
Mhm.
time, or they don't understand consequences, right?
Yep.
It feels to people who don't understand like it's a choice. You're choosing to not remember, you're lazy or
Mhm.
irresponsible, all
Right.
the things, right? And so it sounds like you grew up feeling like you needed to explain yourself to people so that they didn't judge or label you.
Yep. Exactly.
What was that? So, if we could go back, being that kid, what did that judgment and labeling sound like to you? What did you hear when people were judging or labeling you?
I had a lot of people telling me she could learn if she wanted to. You could do math if you really wanted to do that. Your parents just need to work with you. I even heard I have limited hand dexterity in both of my hands, and we thought, well, maybe that's just part of the learning disability. But we didn't know it could have also be the hand dexterity issue. So whenever I was a small child, whenever I was making my letters and people would say that I was sloppy or I was messy. I even had a W on my report card in second grade for weakness in handwriting.
Mhm.
I even had a teacher that when I was in high school said, "Well, I can tell by your backpack and your handwriting what your room at home looks like." And yes, okay, it was not the neatest. I still struggle with the organization. And there was a peer that said, "Oh yeah, if you want to become a writer, you're going to have to learn how to be neat." I even had an editor that has asked for a handwritten piece to this day. But I had
Okay.
to like justify, like, well, I'm doing my best, or yeah, and that I can just remember that shame that people didn't want to have or didn't want to talk about that.
So it sounds to me like for you, you felt enormous shame,
Yeah, I did.
right? Because instead of seeing you as somebody who had strengths and weaknesses and somebody who was trying their best, they saw you as somebody who wasn't trying enough. And
Exactly.
there's shame to that, right? Because it's like if people believe you weren't trying hard enough and you could if you just tried harder, right? Then that speaks to your character,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
when you know it's not about your character and you really are trying, but you're not measuring up to the expectations around you, that can really hurt so deeply. It can be really painful, but also it can make you feel unsafe, right? If I'm
Right.
trying my best, but the people around me don't believe me, I have to prove it to them in order to be safe,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
And so that
Mhm.
becomes now sort of like wired into your nervous system, right? I have to explain myself to people in order to not be judged by people because being judged by people means I'm not safe. People will see me
Yep.
as something I'm not. I will be ashamed. They will think badly of me. And then I'll lose opportunities or I'll lose friends or I'll lose a job or whatever it is because people are going to see me in a light that is not accurate. And then I'm not protected. I'm not safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can see that.
It's so hard, you know? So you at this point, right, when you hear somebody say something to you that brings you into this place of this person doesn't get me. This person thinks I'm trying hard enough. This person thinks I don't care. Oh, this person thinks I'm lazy, right? You immediately resort back into that old frame of mind where
Mhm.
you're like, I have to protect myself right now. And explaining myself as protection.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, have you have you spoken to therapists? Have you worked on trying to expose yourself to the discomfort of this without trying to explain yourself? Is that any work you've ever done in the past?
I haven't really done that. No, I haven't.
Okay. I always like to ask because
Mhm.
I don't want to suggest something you've already tried because not everything works for everybody.
Right.
So, here's the thing, right? We all, as human beings, right? We all have a nervous system that is wired based on what we've experienced, right?
Mhm.
So if
Right.
you've experienced the danger, right? And this is now perceived danger, even though it might not feel like danger or sound like danger right now, or maybe people listening might not necessarily understand why it's danger. It does feel like danger when you feel like the people around you who are making decisions for you, whether or not you go to college, whether or not you can have a job, or whether or not you get grounded or punished, or whether or not there's punitive measures or what grade you get. or whether or not you can have a position, right? It feels dangerous when the people around you don't see you for who you are and they're falsely judging you, right? Which brings up shame. So the danger is twofold. The danger can be real consequences because now you might not get a job, or you might fail a test, or you might get a bad grade, or you might have somebody yell at you or accuse
Mhm.
you wrongly of something, which can result in something negative. So there could potentially be real danger in that. The other part of the danger is just how it feels. It's the feeling itself. How does it
Right.
feel to be told you're not good enough? How does it feel to be told you're not trying hard enough? How does it feel to be told you're inadequate in one way or another because of something that you're choosing to do, right? So it feels unsafe in the emotional experience of it. It also
Mhm.
feels unsafe in the lost opportunity, right?
Right.
And so
Mhm.
what happens is your nervous system becomes wired to be like, if I don't explain myself, I'm not safe, right?
Exactly.
Right? So now today, when you're in scenarios, right, where
Mhm.
somebody just has a judgment of you or even somebody around you, you immediately snap into that mode of
Mhm.
protection, right?
Yep.
So one of the things I could suggest trying in these moments is to take a deep breath and to pause and to say, before I react, I'm going to give myself an opportunity to regulate, right? Before I snap into action, right? Because I
Mhm.
feel the urge to start explaining. What if I sat for a couple of moments and allowed myself to regulate, connect within myself, connect with the moment, connect with what's happening to me and understand it before I start correcting? Because I may not need to correct in this situation. This may not be
Right.
somebody I have to explain myself to. Maybe it is, but I bet you a lot of times it isn't, right? You don't need to explain yourself. So the exercise becomes exposure. Let me sit and expose myself to the discomfort of not explaining
Mhm.
myself and regulate myself at the same time. What this does is it rewires your nervous system so that when somebody doesn't get you or somebody gets you wrong, right? You don't necessarily get triggered. You don't go into fight or flight. You don't feel unsafe. Instead, you're able to sit with that and say, well, that sucks. They don't get it, but that's okay. It's
Mhm.
not my job to explain the world to everybody, and not everybody is going to get it. And it doesn't make me unsafe every time someone doesn't get it, depending on who in the situation, right?
Exactly.
I've got to take it
Mhm.
case by case, but there are going to be times when you don't need to explain yourself. But the most important thing is you want to understand the trigger that's coming up and be able to regulate yourself, because what happens over time, if you pause and you connect within yourself and you regulate yourself instead of reacting, is you start to send a message to your brain and to your body. I don't have to feel unsafe every time this comes up. I'm not in danger
Okay.
automatically just because this is coming up. Because what that will do for you is take the power away from the people around you and give it back to you. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely does.
Right? To be able to sit and take a deep breath, right? Big inhale, long exhale, almost like you're blowing up a balloon, right? Just sit
Mhm.
and breathe and say, okay, regulation takes a little bit. It doesn't happen in a snap, it doesn't happen overnight. I'm going to just sit and I'm going to regulate, and I'm going to let my body bring itself into a place of calm. I'm going to understand what's coming up for me. This reminds me of old things, reminds me of what it was like to be a kid and be told I wasn't going to this and I wasn't going to that. But am I really unsafe right now just because that person doesn't get me?
Right.
Do I need to explain myself to this person? What would it be like to not explain myself to this person and to accept that they just don't get it and that's okay? To pause
Exactly.
on it, and over
Mhm.
time it becomes less and less triggering.
Like that. I like that. That is definitely something to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, there's your present adult self that knows they got it wrong. I did go to college. and I am successful, and I do have a job, and I have a meaningful job, and I make a difference in the world, and I'm doing okay. And you can get by in life without being good at math,
Yep. Exactly.
right? I'll tell you, as a licensed clinical social worker who is very successful in my practice, I do very little math, right?
Right, right.
I could have been terrible at math and still be doing what I do today, and it would not have mattered,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So sometimes, really what we need to do is expose ourselves to the discomfort, tolerate the distress that you avoided, right? One of the things you said earlier was that you would distract yourself in order to
Mhm.
avoid how painful it felt to be told you weren't good enough.
Right.
And instead of distracting, if you were to stay with it and be like, well, do I agree that I'm not good enough? Am I really not good enough? Do I have to prove myself to this person? Or is it just unfortunate that this person doesn't get it?
Yeah, that is something to think because,
It's
yeah,
it's their
sometimes people.
ignorance, not
Yep.
mine, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it still exists very much today. I'll tell you as an advocate working with children and working within schools and whatnot, working with parents, unfortunately, there still today are people who have good intentions but don't really get it. I
Right.
still hear it. I mean, we could be working with, kids in elementary school, kids in middle school, kids in high school, and we'll hear school personnel or parents saying things like, well, how is this kid going to function in the real world or get a job one day if they can't even wake up in the morning and be on time for school? And I'm like, well, they're 13.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that you think that this person is going to show up at 30 the way they're showing up at 13? Do you not understand how much brain growth and development is gonna go on between 13 and 30?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Especially a kiddo with a learning disability, right? The prefrontal lobe grows slower, but it grows. It continues to grow, right? And so the reasoning ability and the problem-solving ability and the sleep cycle and the self-control and the working memory, time management, motivation, all of that, which exists in the prefrontal lobe, is so immature in childhood, but continues to grow in some individuals upwards of being 32 years old. So
Yep.
you can't
Exactly.
possibly say that how this kid is showing up at 10 is a reflection of who they're going to be as an adult.
Right, exactly, because yeah, it grows, it changes, and yeah, and with that encouragement, that person can be, yeah, it can definitely is going to be a different person. Yep.
Yep. And I think the mistake that a lot of adults make is they look at a kid at 10, 12, 13,
Mhm.
15, what have you, and say, if you're not able to do this, you're not going to be able to do that. And that is not true.
Yep. Nope, it's not. We never know what somebody, yeah, exactly can do or what somebody will do in the future.
Yeah, we also know that when we focus on somebody's strengths and nourish their strengths and nurture their strengths, those strengths grow.
Yes.
And a lot of success can come from really helping an individual lean into what they're good at, right? We are all not good at everything. Sometimes what I
True.
say to my kids who have learning disabilities and who have or are neurodivergent is I'll say, we are all not good at everything. If you went to school tomorrow and we decided to do like a mashup, and we decided to take your English teacher and have them teach Spanish, and take your Spanish teacher and have them teach French, and take your
Mm.
social studies teacher and have them teach biology, and take your biology teacher and have them teach global history, and so on, what would happen?
Yep.
It'd be terrible. They wouldn't know what they were doing. Doesn't mean they're not smart or capable, but you're putting something in front of them that is not their strength. So they're not going to be, so it's going to look like they don't know what they're doing and they're bumbling idiots, but they're not.
Right, and I've actually seen that at my job. Whenever we will have subs, there is one person in particular that's really good at math, and she came to sub for English. And she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I said, okay, I'll help out with the English. And then when she would sub for science or for math, I would say, I can't, she never forgot that. And she knew I wasn't good at that. And she's like, "That's okay. I'll take care of that. You just take care of taking care of the students." And I think that is just so powerful. It doesn't mean that one of us wasn't smart. Just it meant maybe in that one area, we all have things we're good at and things that we're bad at.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And that's just the way it goes, right? We all have different brains. The other trigger you mentioned was when people are mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, if somebody isn't nice to you, what does that bring up for you? What do you feel? What do you experience? What do you think's happening for you in those moments?
I think it comes down to that safety again too, that this person doesn't like me and what is wrong with me, that sort of thing. Because that's how I felt like when I was in school before I found friends and outside of my school. It's like, well, what was wrong with me? And even
Yeah.
people saying, "Oh, there must be something wrong with you or what you're doing," and I certainly wasn't perfect, but I think it just kind of brings back that and trying to like read maybe what that person what it comes back to that justifying again. Like if somebody wants you to if I have someone that has maybe a more pushy or more personality or something like that or people pleasing, I almost want to not do what they wanted me to do, but it's hard for me to walk away sometimes with that and having to say or even to maybe give an answer like I have to have that person understand. And it comes back to that again.
Yeah. Because having that person understand helps you feel better about yourself. Right.
Yep.
It's like if that person, because like if you walk back through what you just said, right? When this person isn't nice to you, your trigger is what's wrong with me,
Yep.
right? It
Mhm.
immediately triggers self doubt, low self
Yep.
esteem, right?
Mhm.
These guilty feelings. Something's wrong with me. I did something wrong. I'm not good enough. And then if you can prove to them that you are good enough and get their approval, then you can feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So the
Except
safety, right? The danger, really, and the danger safety threshold here is what does it feel like to feel bad about myself? Right. I feel
Mhm.
terrible when I feel bad about myself. I feel sad. I feel overwhelmed. I feel it's a yucky feeling. Right. I don't want to dislike myself. I don't want to deal with the pain and discomfort of not feeling good about myself. And so
Mhm.
I need to get that person's approval
Yep.
so that I can like myself and feel okay.
Exactly.
Right? So there's
Yep.
the trigger, right? It brings you back to that older, like not older, but that younger version of yourself, right? That is so quick to doubt yourself, so quick to blame yourself. Even
Right.
though I can certainly hear in your present adult self that you don't believe that for 1 second, that you
Right.
know your worth. You know it. You know your strengths. You know your success. You know your worth. You know it's all a bunch of baloney, right?
Right.
But there's a younger version of yourself that gets triggered and that emerges in that moment and is like, "Oh, Michelle, just get this person to understand you, get them to see you, get them to like you so that we don't have to feel bad."
Right, exactly. Or even if I have to leave maybe a situation, that person is just maybe not necessarily bad, but it's just not the right one for me. And trying to leave and not wanting that person to feel bad or wanting to feel bad about myself, especially if that other person has a disability, that can be hard too. And that makes me feel bad. And then I get angry and then I feel bad for being angry at somebody for that and too. And then I look at myself, oh, am I really this horrible person because I feel that way?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the work there is on understanding where these dynamics are coming from,
Mhm.
right? Noticing them when they're happening. And instead of distracting and avoiding, which is sounds like was been
Mhm.
part of your pattern, right? You either
Right.
distract and avoid or you try to over justify,
Yep.
right? So if we did none of the above, right? If we didn't try to over justify and we didn't distract and we didn't avoid, and instead we stayed with it and allowed two different things to be true, right? To say, you know what? I feel badly that this person isn't for me and that I need to walk away or take my distance from them. I feel bad about it, but it's also okay, right? I can't necessarily like be in a relationship with everybody I meet, right? Everybody isn't for everybody. Sometimes it's not going
Right.
to be a good connection or a good fit. And it's okay. I can be kind to someone, but set a boundary at the same time. I can feel bad that I need to walk away, but give myself permission to walk away and still be a good person.
Yes,
It's an all or
exactly.
nothing, right? Being able to
Right.
hold two things true at the same time that feel conflicting and allow, right? Because you're very quick to judge yourself. I think because you
Mhm.
felt judged your whole life, part of your protection is self judgment, right? And
Yep.
so noticing that and noticing when you're judging yourself and saying, oh, look what I'm doing. I'm judging myself because this is how I protect myself. But
Mhm.
maybe instead of judging myself, I need to just notice what I'm experiencing, notice what I'm feeling, notice what's happening without judgment.
Right.
And even of others, if somebody isn't being nice to you, right? Don't be so quick to say, what's wrong with me? Right? Maybe just say, well, what I'm noticing is that person doesn't really get me.
Yeah.
And that's
Exactly.
okay. I'm
Mhm.
not going to judge them for not getting me, but I'm also not going to judge myself because they
Right.
don't get me. Can I accept that this person doesn't get it without judgment at all? Can I practice that?
Mhm.
Right?
I like that. Right.
Yeah. So these are all things,
Mhm.
again, we can't change
Yeah,
ourselves
yeah, just
overnight. It's not a snap of a finger. It's easier said than done. But like these are the tools to rewire the nervous system, to notice the trigger, to sit with the trigger, to tolerate it, to understand where the fears of danger or the safety issue is,
Mhm.
right? Notice that younger version of yourself that is showing up and kind of nurture her, right? Like sometimes what we have to do is we have to picture that little version of ourselves. Remember what she looks like. Right, close your eyes, picture her in your mind, and sit down with
Mhm.
her and have a conversation with her and tell her the things that she needed to hear but didn't. All the things you're saying to the students you work with today, right? Like if you had
Right.
you when you were growing up, what might you have said to you, right? Being able to have these conversations and sit
Mhm.
within these experiences are the things that will help you to rewire and start to feel safer.
I like that.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite people is Dr. Ross Greene. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I haven't.
Dr. Ross Greene is a psychologist. He wrote the book Lost in School. He also wrote a book called The Explosive Child. He has another new book out, but I can't remember the name of it at the moment. I'm having like menopause brain and I can't think. So, Dr. Greene, and this is a quote, he says, children do well when they can.
Yep.
And it's a very true and very powerful statement. What do you hear when you hear that statement? What does that statement mean to you?
I think when we set our children up for success, then they're going to do well. But when we set them up where we don't, or whenever we don't meet their needs, then it's almost like we're setting them up not to succeed. And that's where I think a lot of that with our kids too. Like I might do that with our students. Like if we have a sub that's coming in that I know, well, first of all, anytime we get a sub that comes in, that can really set off a lot, just a lot of things for our students. So I try to be there to go on their level, and I'll be like, all right, if you need something, come on, talk to me about that. I'll help you. I'll advocate. I'll do a lot of that support. But that sets them up for that success rather than trying to set them up to be these perfect children that are just going to adjust maybe to change very well, which doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the reality is that if a child is showing up in a struggle, they're
Mhm.
not doing well, believe them.
Yep.
Don't assume they're
Exactly.
lazy or that they're not trying hard enough or that
Yep.
they could do better if only, right? If
Right.
they're struggling, believe them. Believe
Exactly.
them and ask yourself as the adult, what can I do to help?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So I wonder, Michelle, if you have any thoughts. Is there anything that you feel is important that we didn't get to, or anything I didn't ask, or anything you wanted to say but didn't get to say so far today?
I think we got through everything.
Great. I really truly appreciate, your vulnerability and your bravery and your willingness to come on here. I think that this is a truly important conversation because I think every day there are children struggling and there are adults who are struggling because they didn't get the support they needed when they were children. And, hearing that they're not alone and that this is a very normal, common, everyday struggle that so many people go through, I think it's so, so super helpful for other people. I experienced this personally. My son has dyscalculia and he's 25 now, but going through school and really just not being able to do math at all, he got a lot of the same messaging at school, right? And it was just
Yep.
like, well, he's not going to go to college. So let's talk about vocational training, or he's not going to be able to do this or that. So let's talk
Mhm.
about that and this. And it's amazing how wrong they get it sometimes, right? And
Yes.
it's so important to if you don't have it, to be the strong person and to be the nurturing person and the encouraging person in your own life and in your own story, and to never give up on yourself no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Michelle, so much for being on the show today. I loved this conversation. This is definitely a topic near and dear to my heart. I think it is so important, and I'm so glad that you were here to share with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Yep, it's been very insightful.
Yeah. So, to our listeners, if this resonated for you and was helpful, then we are so glad, because that's the whole purpose. And if you know anybody that you think this could be helpful to, please make sure to share it with them, because that's how we get the word out. That's how we spread the word and help others, right? By sharing these stories with the people who need to hear it. So, with that, I think we will end today's episode. I appreciate you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to What Triggers You with Stacy Pelletieri. For more information or to apply to be on the show, visit whattriggersyou.com. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to listen, like, and subscribe. Until next time.